It's almost the end of the year. We're gonna have to start thinking about what goals we want for our next year. But first, we have to ask ourselves, what have we done this year? For language learning, it's sometimes difficult to know you're making progress because you don't really feel like much has changed. We go through the same thing over and over again and it feels like nothing's changing, but there are some informal ways to gauge progress. The formal way to gauge your language skills is through a standardized test, but there's some informal ways you can do that too. Different languages have different landmarks. What's easy in one language could be really hard in another. I remember in the third year of high school French, we spent months and months learning about the subjunctive. In practical terms, we were spending months and months about how to talk about what it is necessary to do in correct grammar. For French, this is a very advanced grammar that's saved for months of third year French. For something like Japanese, this is a really simple lesson that is done in 1 week in the second semester of college Japanese, if I remember correctly. So I want to show a list I've made of 10 ways to know you're improving in your language. The first one's pretty obvious. Learner's content is too easy for you. Sometimes I try a new app for a language to see if it's right for me, and I get surprised at how simple some of these apps can be. But if I take a step back, I realize this is actually really good. I'm not at that level anymore. Objectively, I have gone past this beginner stage, and getting past a beginner stage is something to applaud. The second way to know you're improving is you can understand from context. If you're understanding from context, you're engaged with the language and you understand what is being spoken about. Think about being an absolute beginner. You have no idea what the topic is, but if you know what the topic is and you're just missing a few words, you have definitely improved from the early days. Those first two are really for beginners, but for advanced learners, another way to know you're improving is that you notice less and less words in native level content. I try to browse news in my target languages all the time, and I like to take notes on the words that I don't know. Before, I would read a German news article, and I would fill 2 pages of vocab up. These days, it's more like 1. It's not like this article was particularly easy. No, in general, I am encountering less and less new words. The tricky thing about this is that it's a silent victory because we're talking about the absence of something. So when we're talking about the absence of something, it's really hard to measure that it's not there. But it is such an important way to gauge that you're improving. Another way to know you're improving in your target language is that you can explain something in the target language, particularly something you don't know. People really underestimate the power that they have at the intermediate level. They can explain a lot of really simple concepts. If I asked you to explain a word in your target language, you might panic at first, but you probably already have the tools to explain that using other basic vocabulary. If you were doing things right and you were learning basic vocabulary, they build off each other. If I told you to explain what sleep is because you just don't know the word for sleep, you could explain it and say something like, sleep is the thing that we do at night when we close our eyes and stop doing things. All of those words are like the top 200, 300 words of every language. Well, sleep is also really high up on the list, but my point is you can explain really basic things with basic words. Things just build off more and more as you improve more and more. Another way you know you're improving is you don't rely on your native language for phrasing. A huge moment in language acquisition is when you disconnect your native brain and start expressing yourselves in the terms that the language allows. You should be using the tools you already have. When you think, oh, what's the word for this? There might be a reason you don't already know that word. Maybe it's not that common in the target language. Cultural lens affects a language's vocab so much that when you don't know a word, there might be a cultural reason why they didn't mention this word. I had a recent encounter with Japanese where I was translating something for my Instagram. I was trying to translate like the causation of a negative action, and that just doesn't happen in Japanese. And I thought more and more, and I realized, oh, there's another way to say this exact thing. There's a simpler way that isn't a literal translation, but is much more natural and much more common in Japanese, and I went with that. That was a real moment of growth because I wasn't thinking in terms of my native language, I was thinking in terms of Japanese. Another way to know you're improving in your target language is you can hear accents. There's a spectrum of this. You might not know where someone is from, but you can realize that person has a different pronunciation than what I've been taught. Once you get better, you realize the small differences between cities that are nearby. Something like Australian and New Zealand accents are really similar, but once you were pretty native, you can probably tell the difference. Another way you know you're improving in your target language is you internalize a vocab distinction that your native language doesn't make. There are so many pairs of words that translate to the same thing in your native language, and when you stop manually thinking about which one to use, then you know you've really improved. When you can just naturally use two words that are really similar, you know you've improved. A really fun way you know you're improving in a language is you catch your mistakes before anyone says them. The beginner is not going to know that they mispronounced something or they used the wrong grammar there, but when you can hear yourself and realize, oh wait, that's not right, and you instantly correct yourself, you're already improving. Last week I mentioned the French word émouvoir, and I accidentally said émouvir, and when I was editing I was cringing so hard at myself because that was like the central point of what I was saying and I mispronounced it. And then in editing I was able to catch that mistake. I failed at the moment of pronunciation, but when I heard it back without the prompt of a French teacher, I was able to tell I did something wrong. Cringe is good in language learning. We are all disgusting people and we should hate ourselves. Another way to know you are improving in your target language is you naturally code switch when writing notes to yourself or talking to yourself. When we are writing something that's just meant for our eyes and naturally your target language comes out because that word just fit better, you know you're starting to internalize things. And sometimes when you're talking to yourself, you realize that target language's word fits so much better than your native language. That means you're getting a feeling for when this word is used and why it's more meaningful or less meaningful than your native language. So it is really a huge improvement. Talking to yourself and writing notes to yourself is a powerful tool for language practice in a stress-free and judgment-free environment. Recently, when I open my phone, I talk to myself and I say, what is the Zustand of my Instagram? The last way you know you're really improving in your language is you can build words that actually exist. By that, I mean you can guess the existence of words without ever having learned them. It means you're grasping at a general rule that actually does work and you are understanding the internal logic of the language. I remember a situation where I was doing a language exchange in Korean and I wanted to say something about a translator, Google Translate, and I didn't know the word for translator. I knew the word for translate and I knew it was a machine, so I said translate plus the suffix that is for machines, and it just worked and I was absolutely shooketh. And I saw from her reaction that, oh, that is a word, and I felt so proud that day. It is really hard to know whether you're improving in a language, especially if you're in that intermediate plateau, but there are some informal ways to know you're improving. It can be really discouraging when you go from constantly learning and noticing a lot of difference in your understanding to a moment where you don't get a lot of improvement. But we need to encourage ourselves sometimes to know our effort is paying off. By definition, language learning is a process. It's not an on-off switch. So in reality, with every word you learn, you are improving. It's just difficult to gauge when all of those words come together to push you to the next level. It's hard to tell when you've reached a new landmark, especially if you're self-studying. Let me know in the comments what you think. How do you gauge your learning? How do you know you've improved? I'm really curious to see what other people say in the comments. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more from me. You can follow me on my social media. I try to post on Instagram every day. I also have a website, studywithalex.com, where I talk about language-related things. So thank you for watching this week. I'll see you for another video next week, alright? Au revoir.